Hey everybody, it's Ron from Pick Dawgz, and welcome to the first installment of the new NFL edition of Ron's Rundown. That's right, we're going over every single NFL game this season, starting with week 1 in this video, and we're going to be talking football all year long on the Pick Dawgz YouTube channel, so make sure you hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to our channel, it helps us out a ton. You can share this video to your friends and family to also help us out. And you can leave a comment down below with what your football plays are for week 1 of the season. Maybe some of your predictions for a season long, win-loss predictions, Super Bowl futures, anything you want to put down in the comments section, go ahead and do that. And if you want to find my MLB, NFL, or college football best bets, you always can find those at Pick Dawgz Premium. I'll have a link in the description. But I'm excited to talk some football with all of you this year. Let's crush the books together. Here are the games for week 1 of the NFL season. First up, we see your Thursday Night Football contest on NBC. It's the Buffalo Bills and the Los Angeles Rams. Now, we're going to see a Buffalo Bills team as one of the top Super Bowl contenders entering the 2022 campaign. Last year, they went 11-6 in the regular season. They won the AFC East, and they took down their AFC East rivals in the wildcard round of the AFC playoffs in the Patriots 47-17. Then losing to the Chiefs in the next round in overtime 42-36. That was one of the better playoff games I've seen in quite some time. Game looked like the Bills were going to the AFC Championship, but you gave a little bit too much time to Patrick Mahomes. He tied the game in the regulation period, and then it went to overtime. Chiefs got the ball to start overtime, and that was all she wrote. So the Bills definitely have a chip on their shoulder entering the season. They are one of the favorites to win the AFC, let alone the AFC East. And on the other side, what more can be said about the Los Angeles Rams, the Super Bowl champions a season ago, taking down the Cincinnati Bengals 23-20 in the Super Bowl final. And Matthew Stafford a little banged up going into this season, but he still has got some of the best weapons in football, including Cooper Kupp, who broke so many records last year as a wide receiver for the Rams. And you add in a guy like Allen Robinson, who didn't have the best numbers in terms of his receptions and receiving yards with the Bears last season, but kind of a quarterback carousel has been going on in Chicago. So now Robinson certainly got his best quarterback throwing to him in his career thus far. We'll have to see if his numbers step up there. I think this is going to be a fantastic game, and I think it's surprising to see a Super Bowl champion that's at home in their first game back. This is their first game since the Super Bowl. They're underdogs here to the Bills, and you don't see that too often, but I do think I like the home dog here getting the 2.5 points. I don't think you can take the Rams without thinking they have a chance to win this game, and I could certainly see them winning this game. I think the Rams have the advantage in their offensive and defensive lines. Obviously, the Bills have a lot of playmakers, including their quarterback himself and Josh Allen, who is a dual threat. He can definitely beat you on the ground as well as through the air, and you got a guy like Stephon Diggs in the receiving core. You add a guy like Gabriel Davis, who's a rising star. This is going to be a fantastic game with plenty of talented stars, but I got to give the edge to the Rams, especially at home. I think this line opened up at Los Angeles -1. The line's moved up to Buffalo -2.5. I think there's some value now with the Rams as the home dog. So I'm going to take a shot here with the Los Angeles Rams getting the 2.5 points. Next up, we see the New Orleans Saints taking on the Atlanta Falcons. Right now, the Saints are 5.5-point favorites. The total set at 42.5. I don't love laying a lot of points with road teams early on in the NFL season. However, the home team has been miserable in this particular rivalry series. Not only are they 1-6 straight up, the home team is in the last 7 matchups, but they're also 1-6 against the spread. So I do think that New Orleans is actually going to have a good fan base travel to Atlanta. They usually do. So I don't think this crowd is going to be too heavy and too intimidating for the Saints. And I think Jameis Winston is an extreme upgrade at quarterback than what the Saints had to deal with last year with a lot of injuries. They had 3 guys go in there other than Winston, and Trevor Siemian, Taysom Hill, and Ian Book. Ian Book only got 1 start, and it wasn't a good one, but Trevor Siemian, Taysom Hill, although they held down the fort at times, I still don't think that they're the type of passer that the Saints need. And Jameis Winston, in his time with the Saints last year, he played a few games before getting injured. He had 1,100 passing yards. He had a 59% completion, so you'd like to see that rise a little bit, but a 14-3 touchdown to interception ratio is really good for Winston's standards, as we've seen him throw plenty of interceptions in his time at Tampa Bay. So if he can limit the interceptions, he's going to be a guy that's going to put up 20-plus touchdown passes a year if he stays healthy, and he's got the weapons. He brings back Michael Thomas. He is questionable for this game, so we'll have to see if he suits up, but getting back Alvin Kamara and plenty of new first-round draft pick in Chris Olave, so plenty of weapons that Winston has in this offense. We know the Saints' defense is going to be tough, and I don't think the Falcons do much offensively. Marcus Mariota is going to have a lot of work cut out for him in this game and this season, as well as the Falcons, although they got Kyle Pitts there at tight end, It's not really the best offensive line. Don't think they're going to be able to run the football much this year, and I think this is going to be a tough spot for them against the Saints. I think the Saints are just a much better team, so I'm going to take the New Orleans Saints and lay the 5.5 points in this one. Next up, we see the San Francisco 49ers taking on the Chicago Bears. We're going to see the 49ers as a 7-point favorite and the total set at 41. Last year, the 49ers 10-7 overall in the regular season, and they won 2 playoff games on the road. They went to the NFC Championship, losing by 3 in a 20-17 game to the Los Angeles Rams. And overall, I have to say it was a successful year for the 49ers. It's a franchise that didn't really even believe in their quarterback through the season, and Jimmy G. He was good in the role that he had, but I do think that Trey Lance is an upgrade at quarterback, and I think he's going to be able to get them over the hump this season and make a deep run yet again, perhaps a Super Bowl run with the 49ers. This is a very strong defense, a team that has one of the best linebacking groups in the league, a very good defensive line, and now you have a talented quarterback that can beat you both ways, and a solid run game if you get Elijah Mitchell healthy. This is a dangerous 49ers team, and they're facing a Bears team that's rebuilding. They're giving the ball to Justin Fields as a starter from day one this season. I think that's something that they should have done last year, but Fields looked good in the preseason. The Bears looked pretty good overall in the preseason, but now we get to the regular season. I don't really love them in this game, but I also don't want to lay more than a touchdown with a road team in week 1 of the year. So I'm looking at a 2-team or a 2-part teaser in the NFL for this particular game. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game overall. I think the 49ers defense, like I mentioned, one of the better defenses in the league, and I don't think the Bears are going to do much offensively. So I'm going to do a 6-point teaser with the 49ers and the under. So it's going to be a San Francisco -1 and the under 47, 6-point teaser at -120 odds. I think it's a pretty good price for a play that I really like. Next up, we see an AFC North rivalry between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Bengals 6.5-point favorites, the total set at 44.5. Now, I do think that the Steelers' offense will look a lot better this year. I think they have an upgraded quarterback in Mitchell Trubisky when compared to Ben Roethlisberger. Now, there's no doubt that Roethlisberger's been one of the greats in terms of Steelers quarterbacks in their franchise, but in his later years, and especially last season, he just wasn't able to do what the Steelers needed from him. A 44.6% completion rating as a quarterback in the NFL is just not going to get it done. And although his touchdown to interception ratio wasn't miserable, only 4.2 yards per attempt is just not good in terms of NFL standards. So I do think Trubisky is a better option that the Steelers have at quarterback. We know they have a ton of talent offensively in guys like Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool in the receiving core. Najee Harris in the backfield has been one of the better young running backs in the league, especially last season. So I do think the Steelers' offense looks a lot better this season. Now, defensively, the Steelers have to find a way to stop the run. They had one of the worst rush defenses you're going to see last season, giving up, I believe, 5 yards per carry overall last year. That's not going to get it done, especially against the Bengals team that's got a solid running back themselves in Joe Mixon. But I do think this is going to be an overall higher scoring game. I lean towards the over. But I think there's too many points here that Cincinnati's laying in this one. I like the Bengals overall. I think their season outlook is strong yet again this year. They return Joe Burrow with one of the best dynamic duos in Burrow and Jamar Chase. I think that quarterback-receiver duo could be a deadly one for years to come, but I still think it's going to be a competitive game overall. I'm going to take the points here with the Steelers, lean towards the over. I think it's going to be a 3-point game either way, so give me the points with Pittsburgh. Next up, we see the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Detroit Lions. We're going to see the Eagles as a 4-point favorite and the total set at 48.5. This is one of the higher totals in week 1 of the season. I actually do think there's some value on the over in this game. On paper, I don't love this Lions defense, although they've made some really big draft picks in recent years to help bolster that defense. In the preseason, it struggled. Last year, it gave up 27 points per game. I do think overall this is going to be a tough year for the Lions defensively, and I think the Eagles have a pretty exciting offense on their side. Jalen Hurts looking to take that next step as a quarterback. He looked strong last season, led the Eagles to the playoffs, and although it was a one-and-done for Philadelphia, I think this year they have bigger expectations. I think they're the favorites to win the NFC East, and although the Cowboys are right up there as well, it should be a really fun Eagles team to watch. They faced this Lions team last year in Detroit, and they put up 44 points in that game in a 44-6 final score. I think the Lions will chip in a few more points than those 6 points they did last year, as this Lions offensive line, I think, is pretty good. I think you look at DeAndre Swift, one of the better running backs in the league. I know he's a popular fantasy running back choice for a lot of people, and he can beat you on the ground. He's good in as a pass-catching back, and Jared Goff, say what you want about him, but he's been very successful in week 1 games. I think he puts some points on the board in this game. Give me the over in the Eagles-Lions game. Next up, we see the New England Patriots taking on the Miami Dolphins. Dolphins 3.5-point favorites, and the total set at 46.5. And the home team, unlike that Saints-Falcons rivalry, the home team in this series has been very good, 12-3-3 against the spread in the last 18 matchups between these two. And we know the Dolphins play the Patriots pretty well at home in the last few years. Last season, a 33-24 victory in Miami to end the regular season. The year before, 22-12 victory. So some pretty big wins by double digits there, almost 9 points last year. So I like laying the 3.5 points here with the Dolphins. I think they have the better team overall. I think they have the better weapons offensively. And I didn't like what I saw from the Patriots this preseason. I know it's just preseason, but we saw the starters get some work. The offensive line and Mac Jones didn't look very good, and I do worry about that away from home against a tough defense and a tough environment like Miami. It's going to be a 1 o'clock game here, so it is going to be hot in Miami. So I don't love the Patriots' offensive outlook going into the year and in this game. And although the Patriots' defense has been solid, we know the Dolphins brought in a big-time receiver in Tyreek Hill. They brought in a really talented and underrated running back in Chase Edmonds. I think this offense is going to look a lot better. Even though I'm not completely in love with Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback, I think he's good enough here for the Dolphins to grab a win against their rivals. So give me the Miami Dolphins here, laying the points at home. Next up, we see the Baltimore Ravens taking on the New York Football Jets. It's going to be the Ravens minus 7 points here. The total set at 44.5. You know, the Ravens, although we know them as the kings of the preseason, they're still pretty good in week 1 of the year in the regular season as well. Although they lost last year to the Raiders on the road in week 1, they hadn't lost a week 1 game since 2015 before that one. So this is a really good Ravens team in the beginning of the season. They usually like to put on a show against the weaker teams as well. We saw in 2018 a 47-3 victory, 2019 59-10 against the Dolphins, 2020 a 38-6 final score. So the Ravens are known to blow out some teams in week 1, and I think the New York Jets could be in trouble in that case, especially if Joe Flacco is the quarterback. I really don't trust Flacco as a starting quarterback if Wilson's not able to suit up. Wilson suffered a non-contact injury in the preseason for the Jets, and usually those are very, very bad signs, sometimes season-ending injuries, but the Jets are optimistic that not only will he be able to play significant time, he may be as ready as week 1. So if he is ready to go, I think the Jets offense will take a big boost because of that, but still getting back to practice only a few days before the regular season. How ready will Zach Wilson be if he does get to start here? Like I said, I don't trust Joe Flacco. I watched him in the preseason. Not a good option for the Jets passing game. So although I think the Jets have a decent year overall this year, I don't like them in this particular game against a team that loves to put on a show usually in week 1. So I'm going to take the Baltimore Ravens, lay the points. I especially like it if Joe Flacco's out. So give me the Ravens minus 7. Next up, we see the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the Washington Commanders. We're going to see the Commanders as a 2.5-point favorite and the total set at 44. Now, this is a really tough game for me. I think this is two teams that are pretty tough to read going into the season, two teams that had pretty disaster years in 2021. The Jaguars had big expectations with their star quarterback in the draft in Trevor Lawrence. They had brought in a real big-time head coach in Urban Meyer, but obviously that did not work out for the organization. Trevor Lawrence struggled. Some people say it was because of the coaching issues, but I think it'll be a bounce-back year for Lawrence. He brings in a big talent in Christian Kirk in the receiving game, a nice tight end in Evan Ingram. So I do think overall, and then you get a healthy Travis Etienne Jr., it's only going to help this offense. Defense overall wasn't too bad last year for Jacksonville, although the points per game, they did give up 27 points per game, but the run defense was solid. They were able to put some pressure on the quarterback. We saw a guy like Josh Allen go after opposing quarterbacks left and right. So I do think this is going to be a better year for the Jaguars, but I think their hype is a little bit too much going into the season. While on the other side, the Washington Commanders, they had a lot of hype around them going into last year as their defense was very strong in 2020, and they made the playoffs. They lost to the Bucs with a backup quarterback just barely in that game. And I do think that Washington overall disappointing year because of their injuries offensively. We saw a backup quarterback in Tyler Heineke get most of the starts last season. Now they bring in Carson Wentz as a starter. I'm not sure if I can trust in him. He's been inconsistent in his career. Obviously, fantastic in his early years with the Eagles, but struggled down the stretch. I didn't like him in Indianapolis last season. So, is he able to take that next step and get back to where we saw him in that Super Bowl season with the Eagles? I'm not sure. So, these are just two teams that I really don't have a great read on right now. But I do think that the Commanders have the better defense. Playing at home here and laying less than a field goal, not a bad idea. So, I'm going to lean towards the Commanders laying the points, but a game I'm staying away from altogether. Next up, we see the Cleveland Browns taking on the Carolina Panthers. Panthers 2.5-point favorites, a total set at 40.5, so one of the lower totals you're going to see this week. Now, this is not necessarily two of the most exciting teams from a year ago, but this is going to be a pretty entertaining matchup when you see Baker Mayfield playing against his former team right in week 1 of the season. And, I think there is a lot of hype around Baker Mayfield with the Panthers this year, but I don't necessarily agree with it. I think that Baker Mayfield struggled quite a bit last year with the Browns' offensive line. It's one of the better offensive lines in football. A great ground game with 2 amazing running backs in Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Now, were the wide receivers on paper the most talented in the league? No, but he still had a very strong offense foundation, and I think that he struggled himself. He gave up 13 interceptions, only 17 passing touchdowns, and made a lot of mistakes last year. And I don't think it's going to be fixed with one swing in the bat here in his first game with the Carolina Panthers. And this is a really good Browns defense. We know their offensive line is still very good. They still bring Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt back. Now Kareem Hunt probably not going to be on the team for all of the season as he has expressed his desire for a trade, but still, he's going to be playing for that trade and playing to impress some of the teams that may want him. So I do think that both Chubb and Hunt have solid games and solid years this year. And when you look at the Browns secondary, it's improved. Their defensive line is very, very strong. And I think it's going to be tough for Baker Mayfield to do much offensively here, although Christian McCaffrey is back and healthy, and he is a big help to this Panthers offense. But we've seen McCaffrey break fantasy records left and right, and still the Panthers offense not do much, so they can't just put it all on his shoulders. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I agree with the total being so low, and I do think that there's some value with the road dog. I think the Browns are the better team, so I'm going to take the Cleveland Browns taking the points here. Next up, we see the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Houston Texans. We're going to see the Colts as 8-point favorites and the total set at 46. So this is the largest spread of the week. The Colts are 8-point favorites, so no double-digit favorites this week. And, I do think the Colts going into the year, big expectations, I think for good reason. Very strong offensive line, very good ground game with Jonathan Taylor, who's one of the better running backs in the league right now, and a good receiving core of Michael Pittman Jr., a young, talented receiver, and I think he's getting a better quarterback upgrade in Matt Ryan compared to Carson Wentz. And, say what you want about Matt Ryan in his last few years with the Falcons. He had a miserable offensive line in front of him, didn't have many weapons, didn't have a ground game at all. So it wasn't easy to thrive in that Atlanta Falcons offense, to say the least. I think he has a bounce-back year for Indianapolis. This is a very good defense. The secondary, not my favorite, and I think that's where the Texans are going to be able to exploit the Colts defense is through the passing game. Davis Mills, I don't think he's too bad of an option for Houston. I don't think he's a starting quarterback for most teams, but for the Texans who are in the rebuild stages, looking for a guy to take over, a young quarterback, I think Mills is a solid option. Had a pretty good year last year, 67% completion percentage, 2,600 passing yards, 16-10 touchdown interception ratio. Not bad for a guy in his first year at starting quarterback. So I think Mills in this offense will be better than most people expect. I think Dameon Pierce, one of the more hyped-up running backs going into this season from Florida, from the University of Florida. He had a great preseason, and I think there's going to be a decent offense overall from Houston, but I just don't love their defense in this game. So that's why I do like the over in this game. I think the Colts are going to be able to score at will. I think the Texans can find a few touchdowns themselves. Give me the over at a pretty low total, 46. Give me the over in the Colts-Texans. Next up, we see the New York Giants taking on the Tennessee Titans. We're going to see the Titans as 5.5-point favorites and the total set at 43.5. Now, this is not my favorite game on the board, but although I think the Titans win this game outright, I do think the Giants keep this one close enough to cover the spread. I'm seeing a 3-point win here for Tennessee, so I like the points here with the New York Giants plus 5.5. When you look at the Titans, they're definitely losing some of their production from last year defensively. I think that could be an issue early on. Ryan Tannehill, not my favorite option at quarterback, even though Derrick Henry's been able to do a lot of damage for this Titans offense in years past. You lose your number one receiver in A.J. Brown. You lose your number two receiver in terms of receiving yards and receptions in Julio Jones. So some production to replace on both sides of the ball for the Titans. I don't think it's going to be outstanding work early on right away in their first game of the year, even though this is a very tough environment to play in Nashville. I do think that Daniel Jones definitely has his work cut out for him, but I think the Giants improved in terms of their offense. Their defense, I'm not necessarily sold. They did lose quite a few big-name players defensively, including Lorenzo Carter, but I think this is going to be a pretty close game overall. I think the Giants find enough situational offense. Daniel Jones, do I think he's the quarterback of the future for the Giants? No, but do I think he's good enough to compete in this game? Yes, so I'm going to take the New York Giants plus 5.5 points, but like I said, not rushing to the window for this one. Next up, we see the Green Bay Packers take it on the Minnesota Vikings. Packers 1.5-point favorites, total set at 47. The Green Bay Packers are laying points here on the road against the Vikings. It's not easy to do that in Minnesota. The Vikings have a clear home field advantage at US Bank Stadium. It gets very loud there, and especially when the Packers come to town. And last season, the home team was 2-0 both straight up and against the spread in this series, in this rivalry. And this is one of the bigger rivalries in the NFC. These two teams do not like each other whatsoever. And Aaron Rodgers having to replace his number one receiver, and it's not just any old number one receiver, it's Davante Adams, who had 132 receptions, over 1,600 receiving yards, 11 receiving touchdowns, a lot of production to replace in week one of the season on the road. Even the likes of Aaron Rodgers is going to be very tough, and although I think the Packers have a good team overall this season, I think they're going to make the playoffs and perhaps win the division. I still think this Vikings team has made some big adjustments defensively. I think they're going to improve defensively overall. They were 29th in the league in terms of average yards allowed per game. That's not going to get it done, but going into the season, I like their defensive line on paper. I think the secondary improves, and I love Kirk Cousins. I don't really understand the criticism. I know he struggles in primetime games, that's for sure. He's been known to choke in those games, but a 33-7 touchdown and interception ratio, over 4,200 passing yards, 66% completion percentage, has one of the best young up-and-coming receivers in the league in Justin Jefferson, over 100 receptions last year, 1,600 receiving yards. I think it's going to be a big year for the Vikings offense, and I think the Vikings getting a little bit, they're not getting enough love here from the books. I'm going to take the Minnesota Vikings on the money line, getting a really good price at home. Next up, we see the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Arizona Cardinals. We're going to see the Chiefs as 6-point favorites and the total set at 53.5, so one of the higher totals you're going to see this week. Now, the Chiefs opened up as a 3-point favorite. Now they're up to 6, and this could go up to 6.5, 7 by the end of the week, and I wouldn't be surprised. And I do think that the Chiefs have a big advantage in terms of their passing game against a rather weak Cardinals secondary on paper. I think the Chiefs are going to be able to score it well in this game, even without Tyreek Hill this season. Travis Kelce is still one of the better tight ends in the league, and Patrick Mahomes, he can do it really with any weapon. We've seen that already in his career thus far, and I think he's going to have another really good season. Last year, the interceptions were concerning, 16 interceptions, but 48 passing touchdowns, almost 6,000 passing yards. It was an unbelievable year for him, and I do think that the Chiefs have a chip on their shoulder. I think a lot of the public is kind of doubting them this year with the loss of Tyreek Hill, so I think this Chiefs team's going to be able to put on a show. Andy Reid, very good in week ones of seasons, and I do think that the Chiefs offense just a little bit too much for the Cardinals to handle. Chiefs defense last year was solid, and I think the Cardinals, they'll be able to put up their fair share of points in this game, but in the end, I don't think they're going to be able to keep up offensively, so especially with DeAndre Hopkins out for the first 6 weeks. So I'm going to take the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm going to lay the points here on the road, and I'm going to lean towards the over as well. In our next game, we see the Las Vegas Raiders taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. We're going to see the Chargers as 3-point favorites, the total set at 52.5, so another pretty steep total here. I'm going to lean towards the Chargers laying the points. I think this spread is pretty much dead on, but I do think that the Chargers are the better team overall, and offensively, I think they have a two-dimensional offense compared to the Raiders, who really didn't do much on the ground last year, and a lot of that's because their offensive line, one of the weaker offensive lines in football. Derek Carr was forced to do a lot through the air, and while I think he'll have another successful year passing this season, especially with Davante Adams in the mix, I still don't love to back a team that can't really run the football away from home. We saw last year in the road game that the Raiders had against the Chargers, it was a 28-14 final score in favor of the Chargers. The Raiders only had 48 rushing yards total, only 213 total yards in the game, and it was not a pretty one for the Raiders, one of their worst performances of the season. So I'm going to lean towards the Chargers here at home. I think getting Justin Herbert another year in his development process, I think he's already shown he's one of the more exciting young quarterbacks, and you bring back Mike Williams, you bring back Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler in the backfield, very potent offense. So give me the Chargers laying the points. It's your Sunday night football contest on NBC between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys. The Bucs are 2.5-point favorites, a total set at 51, and this total opened up at 52. It's gone down a point to 51, and I do think it could continue to fall. I've seen some 50.5s as well, and I actually like the under in this game. When you look at the Cowboys offensively, they lose a big part of their offensive line in Tyron Smith, who's going to be out for this season. We've seen the splits for Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott when he's out of the lineup. They haven't been the best, and I do think against a solid Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, one of the better defenses, I would say better than solid, one of the better defenses on paper going into the year. It's going to be a tough spot here for the Cowboys offensively. They're going to have CeeDee Lamb in there at receiver, but Michael Gallup injured. Amari Cooper's gone now. That might actually be a better thing for this offense, but it's going to be some production to replace right away, and I'm not sure I can trust in Ezekiel Elliott right away, as he only had 4.1 yards per carry last year. Very disappointing season for Zeke. And I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense travels here. But on the other side, Tom Bowles as head coach, I think this Buccaneers team going to be a little bit more run-heavy than what we're used to seeing with Tom Brady offenses. Last year, 46 passing touchdowns for Brady, but 13 interceptions. He made some mistakes down the stretch. We know he missed some time in the offseason and was away from the team for a little bit. So I do think the offense is going to start a little bit slower. I think they're going to trust their ground game, a very strong offensive line, and good running back core. Guys like Leonard Fournette in there. So I'm going to take the under in this Buccaneers-Cowboys matchup. In our final game of the week, it's your Monday Night Football contest between the Denver Broncos and the Seattle Seahawks. The Broncos are 6.5-point favorites, and the total is set at 44.5. This is going to be the first start back for Russell Wilson here in Seattle. So we see Baker Mayfield playing against the Browns. We see Russell Wilson playing against the Seahawks in week 1 of the season. And the Broncos, it's not easy to lay points away from home in Seattle. The 12th man is the real deal. A very tough home atmosphere that the Seahawks have, but I just don't love this team overall. I think Geno Smith is not really an answer there at starting quarterback. I think overall this offensive line, one of the worst in football, so I don't really think they do much on the ground, and I don't really trust Geno Smith in the passing game. When you look at defensively, I think this is one of the worst secondaries in the league, and I think Russell Wilson has his weapons and guys like Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. It's a good running game with Javonte Williams. This is a really good Broncos team overall. I think the secondary is also one of the better secondaries in the league. So this is a tough spot for the Seahawks, even though they're going to have the home crowd on their side. I'm going to lean towards the Broncos. It's not easy taking a favorite on the road in Monday Night Football, that's for sure. But that's where I'm leaning right now. So give me the Broncos laying the points. And that's it. Those are the games for week 1 of the NFL season. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. And don't forget to put your NFL plays in the comments section below. Again, if you're looking for my best bets, you can find those at Pick Dawgz Premium. As always, this is Ron Romanelli. Good luck.